Hey there, Brad from Build Your Being. My favorite poet and favorite mystic, Walt Whitman, had this great line I've always loved in his masterpiece, Song of Myself. This 1,300-line mystical poem. Now, Song of Myself wasn't simply about his ego, although that was definitely included. It was more about his unified self. So after going on and on and on, there's this point in the poem where he has this moment of self-reflection and he stops and he says, "Do I contradict myself? Very well then, I contradict myself. I am large. I contain multitudes." Well, good news. We're all large and we all contain multitudes. And I want to demonstrate that for you with an exercise you can do yourself in probably 10 minutes or less so you can see just how fluid self-identity really is. And why is that important? It's because self-identity, how you view yourself, the world, and your place in it, determines the life you get. For most people, that's a default or automatic process. But what I've learned is that we have so much control over that process. And the more proactive and deliberate we are, the better our lives become. We get more success, more happiness, more peace, more love. We get less failure, less frustration, less stress. Ultimately, at the end of the day, life is supposed to feel good. It's not supposed to feel bad. So let's get into it with this quick psychological exercise. I did this exercise myself way back in my 20s, and it blew my mind at the time and completely changed my perspective about how supposedly difficult it is to grow or change. It comes from this book called Your Mythic Journey by Sam Keane and Ann Valley Fox. I'll put a link in the description if you're interested in checking it out. Now, this isn't exactly how they did it in the book. I've made a couple of tweaks, but the underlying principles are the same, and they're very profound. So here's what you're going to do. You're going to make two lists, and you're also going to give them each their own header. The first list is labeled Who I Am, and the second list is labeled, you guessed it, Who I Am Not. It's really simple. On your first list, the Who I Am list, write down 10 words or phrases or short sentences that most define who you are. Now, these can be roles, such as a parent or a good friend or a conscientious employee, or they can be characteristics or qualities or things you really enjoy, like I'm a happy person, or I'm athletic, or highly social, or I really like reading or history or creating art. Basically, all the things that make you unique, make you you. Feel free to pause the video as you put together your first list, which saves me from having to pipe in elevator music for the next few minutes. And then when you come back, you can start on your second list, the Who I Am Not list. When you're ready to begin that one, it's just as simple. On this list, you're going to write down 10 words or phrases or short sentences that describe all the qualities, attributes, characteristics, or interests that you definitely don't have. Things that make you feel uncomfortable. Maybe things that you even detest, like I dread meeting new people, or I'm terrible at math. Now, in some ways, this second list is going to be the more important of the two, and the one we start with when we do our exercise here in a bit. Again, feel free to pause the video as you put together your list. I promise you, this exercise is so much more powerful if you actually do it, rather than just listen to me explain it. So maybe on your list, you might put down something like, being spontaneous terrifies me, or structured settings bore me and kill my soul. The first list was about affirming all the things that make up your identity. The second list is about all the negations that, ironically, also make up your identity. So go ahead and pause this video and come back when you've got your lists put together. Although I really don't mind playing some elevator music while you do this. Okay, just kidding. I trust that you've paused the video, made your two lists, and are now ready to proceed. Okay, here's the fun part. You're going to mentally switch the headers on your two lists. All the things you said you weren't, all the characteristics and qualities and interests that you said you lacked, that should now be labeled Who I Am. And vice versa with your other list. All those things that defined you are now on the Who I Am Not list. But we're going to start with the negation list first. The list that you originally said, these are the things I'm not. Again, you might want to pause the video as you do this, but just take a few minutes and mentally go through each item on the list and make a convincing argument that you really do possess these attributes and characteristics. Now, initially, that might sound ridiculous, but it's actually very easy. Just make the most convincing argument that you can and see what happens. For instance, maybe you have something on your list like, I'm terrible with money. But are you saying that you've never made a good financial decision in your life? You may not have a perfect track record, but surely you've made payments on time before. Surely you've got some memory of purchasing something and saying, damn, that was the best money I ever spent. That was a really good deal, or that was a really great value. Or unless you're living on the streets in complete destitution, you must be managing your money at least at a basic level of proficiency that ensures you're not homeless. Even if you are homeless, the fact that you're surviving says a lot about your ability to manage what little resources you have. Now let's think about this. If you say you're terrible at something, but then you remember, well, except for this one time, and then that other time, and oh yeah, this other time too. Well, are you sure you're actually terrible at it? Looked at from a slightly different angle, if you're good at something, even if only occasionally or even rarely, it's still an ironclad fact that you were actually good at that thing at a certain point in time, or more likely on multiple occasions. So what that means is that you actually do possess that characteristic or attribute in some capacity. What's preventing you from further developing the skill or interest is your own belief, which is subjective, not objective. Because if it were objective, if it really were true, you wouldn't be able to find examples where it wasn't true. Isn't that wild? You may have begun this exercise by thinking, okay, this dude is trying to get me to lie to myself in order to convince myself I'm actually good at something that I suck at. Then you realize the real lie is what you've been telling yourself all these years about your own limitations. Here's a personal story to help illustrate. One of the things I've always negated about myself is that I am probably the worst golfer in the world. I played 9 holes of golf one Saturday with a buddy in high school. My joke afterwards was that it was the longest 7 hours of my life. Now baseball, that was my identity, both playing it and watching it. And I prided myself on being a really good contact hitter. In baseball, I rarely struck out. Well, I certainly struck out a lot on the links that day. I would completely miss the golf ball in a swing attempt. Or sometimes I would top it and the ball would travel all of 3 or 4 feet. And then I'd get mad and embarrassed and overcompensate on the next swing and put this massive trench in the ground. Not a divot, a trench. What made matters worse is that another part of my self-identity was my need to be proficient at whatever I did, to not be stupid or incompetent. Conversation for another day, but the process by which our negative childhood memories define us and make us who we are is based on our subjective interpretations. It's an artificial process and one that we used quickly and reactively all those years ago, rather than consciously or deliberately. But on the golf course that day, there was one swing where I was flawless. I was probably 40 or 50 yards away from the green, and I made this perfect chip shot. It just floated in on this beautiful little arc, bounced a couple of times on the green, and then rolled up to the cup. So, what is the truth? Am I a terrible golfer? Do I hate golf? On that particular swing, neither was true. I was a good golfer in that swing, and watching that little white orb do exactly what it was supposed to do, it seemed in that moment that golf was a pretty fun game. Our self-identity is a construct based on our interpretation of experiences, not the experiences themselves. Now, these interpretations are largely unconscious or automatic or reactive, but they don't have to be. Belief can be changed at the conscious level. In fact, consciously held, consciously chosen beliefs may actually be the only way to reprogram the subconscious. Now, getting back to your lists, I would encourage you to go through those, have fun with the process, and make convincing arguments that the opposite is true for the items on each list. Even the first or affirmation list. For example, maybe you wrote down that you were shy or socially reserved. Well, I'm guessing you could probably remember a time here or there where you actually had a good time at a party or an event, or where you had a cool and engaging interaction with a random stranger. Assuming you have friends, how and where did you meet them? If you were so shy and reserved, how are you ever able to hold that first conversation? But also, look at the positive aspects you identified with. Same thing with those. Maybe you wrote down that you're very intelligent. Are you sure? Scour your memories. You've never done something dumb, never said something stupid, never made a poor decision, never not seen something really obvious that was right in front of you. The point here isn't to run yourself down. It's just to underscore how fluid self-identity really can be, and that it's all based on how you choose, consciously or unconsciously, to interpret and experience. In summary then, the 2 takeaways from the exercise and video as I see them are, number 1, like Walt Whitman, we are large. We contain multitudes. We have access to every quality or attribute or characteristic imaginable. Number 2, self-identity is made from clay, not concrete. We can remold ourselves into any shape we desire or that serves us well. In fact, every one of us has already done this. It's just that for most of us, it's a completely unconscious process. But true magic and alchemy, that happens when you begin to remold yourself consciously and deliberately. Okay, if you enjoyed this, you know the drill. Consider liking, subscribing, and clicking the bell notification icon. I have a lot more videos planned that explore how to consciously create or recreate the best version of yourself and live a self-actualized, happy, magical, profound, and fulfilled life. I would also love for you to share your experiences with this identity exercise in the comments section below. Until next time.